a nation at the crossroads of history. For centuries, this small country in the South Caucasus has balanced between mighty empires and powerful neighbors. From Rome and Persia to the Ottomans and the Russians, Armenia has always been caught between East and West. But today, that ancient dilemma has returned in a new form. Armenia, once deeply tied to Russia, is now rethinking its future. As tensions rise in the region and as global powers shift, Armenians are asking themselves a pressing question: should the country remain loyal to Moscow or turn toward Europe and the West? This is the story of Armenia between Russia and the West and the uncertain road ahead. To understand the present, we need to go back to the past. Armenia's position has always been both a blessing and a curse. Its location at the crossroads of Europe and Asia gave it access to trade, culture, and ideas. But it also meant that Armenia was vulnerable to invasion and domination by larger empires. In the 19th century, as the Russian Empire expanded south, Armenia became part of Moscow's sphere of influence. For many Armenians, Russian control offered protection against the Ottoman Empire, where Armenians had faced persecution. Under the Tsars, Armenians could preserve their faith and culture, even while living under foreign rule. This relationship deepened under the Soviet Union. Armenia was one of the 15 republics of the USSR, tied to Moscow politically, militarily, and economically. For 70 years, Armenians lived under Soviet control. While this brought modernization, industry, and infrastructure, it also meant that Armenia's destiny was decided in Moscow. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Armenia gained independence. But independence came with enormous challenges. The economy collapsed, industry shut down, and Armenia soon became embroiled in war with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh. Isolated and struggling, Armenia turned once again to Russia. For decades after independence, Russia remained Armenia's closest ally. Russia supplied weapons, maintained military bases, and acted as a security guarantor against threats from Turkey and Azerbaijan. In return, Armenia relied heavily on Russia for trade, energy, and jobs. Millions of Armenians migrated to Russia in search of work, sending money back home to support their families. This relationship seemed unshakable. But in recent years, cracks have begun to appear. Why? The answer lies in a series of shocks that changed Armenia's trust in Moscow. First came the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War. When fighting broke out between Armenia and Azerbaijan, many Armenians expected Russia to come to their aid. After all, Armenia was a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, a Russia-led military alliance. But Moscow did not intervene decisively. Instead, Russia brokered a ceasefire that left Armenia weakened and Azerbaijan in control of significant territory. For many Armenians, this was a betrayal. The country had depended on Russia for protection, only to find itself alone in a time of need. The sense of abandonment deepened in 2023, when Azerbaijan launched another military operation in Nagorno-Karabakh. Once again, Russia did little to stop the assault. Thousands of Armenians were displaced, and the self-declared Republic of Artsakh collapsed. The outcome was devastating, and it left Armenians questioning whether Russia was truly a reliable ally. Meanwhile, Russia's own priorities were shifting. The war in Ukraine consumed Moscow's attention and resources. Sanctions weakened the Russian economy, and Armenia, long tied to Russia, began to feel the effects. Suddenly, dependence on Moscow looked less like security and more like vulnerability. At the same time, Armenia began to look westward. The European Union and the United States expressed support for Armenian democracy and sovereignty. France, home to a large Armenian diaspora, offered diplomatic backing. Western institutions began discussing closer cooperation with Armenia, raising the possibility of a new direction for the country. But the road west is not simple. Armenia remains geographically landlocked, with closed borders to Turkey and Azerbaijan. Its only open routes are through Georgia to the north and Iran to the south. Shifting away from Russia means risking economic and military retaliation. Moscow has already shown frustration with Yerevan's growing ties to the West, and the Kremlin still holds significant influence over Armenia's energy and security sectors. So Armenia stands at a crossroads. Should it remain in Russia's orbit even as trust erodes? Or should it take the risk of moving closer to Europe and the West? The debate is fierce inside Armenia itself. Some argue that abandoning Russia is dangerous, since Moscow remains the only power with troops stationed in Armenia. They warn that without Russian support, the country could become even more vulnerable to Azerbaijan or Turkey. Others argue that sticking with Russia has already failed, and that Armenia's only hope for a secure and prosperous future lies in building ties with the West. This struggle is not just political, it is deeply personal. For ordinary Armenians, the decision affects jobs, education, and daily life. Thousands of families rely on remittances from Armenians working in Russia. Shifting westward could put that at risk. At the same time, young people in Yerevan dream of opportunities in Europe, where they see a future of democracy, stability, and integration. There is also the role of the Armenian diaspora. From Los Angeles to Paris to Moscow, Armenians abroad play a huge role in shaping the country's future. The diaspora pushes for closer ties with Europe and the West, advocating for human rights and democracy. At the same time, many Armenians in Russia remain connected to their homeland, creating a web of loyalties and tensions. The Armenian government has tried to walk a careful line. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, who came to power in 2018 after a popular uprising known as the Velvet Revolution, has emphasized democratic reforms and reducing corruption. His government has pursued cautious engagement with Europe while trying not to provoke Moscow. But recent events have made neutrality harder to maintain. In 2023 and 2024, Armenia began freezing its participation in CSTO activities, signaling its frustration with Russia. It also started joint military exercises with the United States, and discussions with the EU grew stronger. These moves were seen as bold steps, suggesting that Armenia is preparing for a future outside of Russia's orbit. But the risks remain high. Russia has shown in other cases that it does not tolerate countries leaving its sphere of influence easily. For Armenia, already vulnerable, the consequences of angering Moscow could be severe. So what comes next? The future is uncertain. Armenia may try to balance both sides, maintaining ties with Russia while deepening cooperation with Europe. This balancing act has long been part of Armenia's survival strategy. But as global tensions rise, choosing neutrality may become impossible. What is certain is that Armenia's decision will shape not only its own future, but also the future of the entire South Caucasus. If Armenia turns west, it could open the door to new opportunities, investments, and security guarantees. If it remains tied to Russia, it may continue to face dependence and isolation. And beyond politics, this is about the resilience of the Armenian people. For centuries, they have adapted to life at the crossroads of empires, surviving invasions, wars, and exile. Today, that same resilience is being tested again. In the end, Armenia's choice between Russia and the West is not just about geography or alliances, it is about identity. Is Armenia destined to remain within Moscow's orbit, or can it chart a new path toward Europe and beyond? The answer is not simple. But one thing is clear. The people of Armenia will decide their future. And just as they have survived every challenge in the past, they will face this crossroads with courage. As always, I encourage you to research for yourself. Learn about Armenia's history, explore its culture, and understand the choices it faces today. Because to know Armenia is to see not just a small country on the map, but a nation that has always stood at the center of history. Thanks for watching. What do you think the future of Armenia will hold?